Yeah.
All right, welcome everyone. I'd like to thank everyone for coming this evening. Jolene, if you could just note roll.
Yep.
And if you're able, please join us in the pledge of allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, this is a workshop. There will be no formal decisions made this evening. It's just an opportunity for us to have a less formal conversation amongst council and staff. And our first line of business here is open forum. This is an opportunity for anyone that wants to come speak, limited to a couple of minutes. Please state your name and address for the record. And I don't know if you have a sign-up sheet.
I do. And Mr. Bear, can we just ask that folks step forward a little bit here so that their audio is captured by a recording device?
So we'll see if anyone signed up. I'll call those first. If not, you just. All right, first one, Joshua Wicklander.
Wicklander, there's no well. Thank you. It's nice to see a lot of you again. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Joshua Wicklander. I'm the chair of the Senate District 33 Republican Party. This last election cycle, we worked our butt off to elect conservatives to every level of government in the Senate District. We won 13 out of 16 seats. We had just one request, that everything be fiscally accountable, transparent, responsible for us to make sure that we can control what's going on in St. Paul and stop it from coming out here. We like our community the way it is. We were able to support a lot of you last election cycle, and I look forward to being able to do it again the next election cycle. We're grateful that you chose to serve your community and to be responsible leaders. There's a couple of spending issues that are going on in Forest Lake right now that are concerning. One is a 13%, I believe is the amount, or 12 or 13% is the proposed levy that's being considered for up here. Hugo's levy this year is 0. Matamita's is 0.8, and Scandia's is 0.6, and the conservatives that we elected at Forest Lake are discussing a max levy of 12% or 13%, which is crazy. You have new Forest Lake government or public works building that you're considering that could be upwards of $50 million is the number that I've heard. And I know it's going to get scaled back from that. That's kind of a worst case scenario. I would suggest that you take that out of the budget and put it on the ballot. And the reason I would suggest that you put it on the ballot and let people decide is it can be a special levy where the tax sunsets once the building is paid for. By increasing the general fund constantly to pay the loan and the debt down, That money's there for the people that come after you to continually spend and add to the city's budget and the city's debt load, and that's just not responsible for what we need. I understand that there's infrastructure and there are things that we consider and that we're looking at doing. We just need to make sure we do it at a limited amount. I would encourage you to get as close to zero as you possibly can with this levy. I know that this is a workshop where you're gonna look at what you need and what you want and what's important, but we appreciate the fact that you stepped up and chose to serve your community. We look forward to being able to see what you can do with this first budget cycle that you've kind of overseen since you've all taken over. Again, thank you for choosing to serve. I know you'll do the right thing. I know that we picked the right people and we backed you. And we dropped 30,000 pieces of lit in this district to be able to turn it red so that we can control spending and have government that's accountable for us. Thank you for all that you do, and if there's anything that I can do to help any one of you, please don't hesitate to reach out and ask.
Thank you.
Next one, Chris.
I'll just say, I concur.
If you
I
just
know
wanted
that
to
you-
state your name and
Oh,
address for the record.
Chris Luger, and, my address, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, 2300, Havelka Court, Horse Lake. Yeah, I couldn't have said it any better myself. I would say I have no additional comments. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for coming in. Julie Vanier.
Hi, Julie Bernier, and address 5063 217th Street North. And I was just hoping for some consideration into maybe separating out the 12 over a certain period of time if possible. We on the lakeside had to have some catch-up taxes added to our properties, and so that would be something that I would really like to see, and thank you very much for all the work that you guys do. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Kim. Thanks for coming. Gary and Dee please.
We just signed.
Okay, great. All right, Linda Patsnick.
Same me, I didn't realize I was signing
Okay.
up to speak, I'm
Okay.
just here to go on everyone else.
Yep,
that I
great.
listened to.
Brian.
I will just concur with Jonathan earlier as well, and we'll send it better. So,
Thank you. Karen Wafton.
I just signed up, I
Okay.
didn't listen.
Todd Sian.
So, my name's Todd Sheena, 7341 Hunter Street. This is my first city council meeting ever.
Great, welcome.
First one, so, I appreciate all the comments that you made thus far, and I appreciate all of your service. I think the big thing is that for the past couple of years, I've watched my taxes continue to go up for the levies for school. Oh, okay. So, my taxes have kind of continued to go up, and I think one of the things is I've got a large family, and, for me, small increases have a big impact in my budget, for my family. And so I think that's one of the things that motivated me here today, is to basically come out here and just say, hey, listen, there's some real consequences to some of these decisions that affect people of this community. And I think one of the reasons why we moved to Forest Lake is because when I moved here, it was known as being a fiscally responsible area. And I just looked, for me, I'm kind of research oriented, so I looked up online, I was like, okay, what size building do they need for this project or things along those lines? You could erect a 100,000 square foot warehouse for $6 million. So I'm like 50 million for this. So for me personally, I'm having a hard time kind of there's this monster number, and then what do we need? And I think that's kind of the thing, is that for me, when I look at my budget, I always have to consider what do I want and what do I need? And then a lot of times I end up scaling back for my want, like what I actually have to have. And so I think that's one of the things that I would just bring here today, is that let's look at what we need, and not necessarily what we want, because I think that's what you hear a lot of people, why we're showing up in order to have these discussions, is because we want that fiscal responsibility. So thank you, appreciate you.
Right, that's the last of those who signed up. I know people started coming in. If anyone's interested in speaking, saying a few words, please step up, state state your name and address for the record, and limit to about 3 to 4 minutes.
Hi, I'm Isaac Erickson. I live over on Everton. And after seeing 12% increase in my taxes, that's, I'm already paying over 7K a year. And I also have a big family. I own 2 small businesses in town, and I would much rather use that money to, I mean, take the family out to dinner more in Forest Lake or whatever, but I was over at the building in, I'm just going off the cuff here, but I went to the new environmental building over here. I just to drop off some fluorescent bulbs from work. It seemed, it's very nice, it's a nice building, it seems kind of unnecessary to me. We used to always toss our pumpkins after, at the landfill, or not the landfill, the compost, every year, and drop off leaves there, and now we have that big, giant, beautiful palace. Seems a little overkill to me. I don't think we need, the new building just seems to be way more than what we need in this town. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else interested in saying any words tonight? Ready, Todd?
Same with Todd.
If you just want to step up, name and address, that'd be great.
Frank Namby, I'm over on Explorer Avenue Park. Been there 20-some years. Same thing as he was saying. I actually got a text on my phone about the meeting tonight, and that it was 12%. I probably need to be more responsible in the idea of what's going on. So I was kind of coming to find out, when was it the 12%? Was it at the last meeting? Or is it just a discussion tonight?
Yeah, so just for the record, the process here, we had, by the end of September, we had set our maximum levy, the highest that we can levy against the residents. And so that was set at 12.4, 0.6. We have until mid-December to lower it. We can't go any higher, we can lower it. I think this council is all in agreement. We will, and we need to lower that amount. So that process is just another step this evening. So we'll be talking through some options, and so that's where, so we have opportunities to lower it. You cannot go any higher than what's proposed.
And then just let me know if this is the right or wrong time to ask, but what was the reason to set it at the highest one?
Yeah, we'll cover that when we get through our presentation.
Okay.
On the budget.
Because in that sense, yeah. Because if you're always going to the highest, the impression is it's like a negotiating thing. Hey, we set it the highest right away. If we bring it down, everybody should feel good. When kind of coming back with Todd was saying, I think it was Todd, just being fiscal responsible. It was just a shock on my phone. I got the text that said, I'm going tonight. Want to hear more about it. And I want to be more involved and support it, because like everybody, I really appreciate everybody saying, we appreciate the work you guys do. But yeah, that's, for me and where we live, it's almost $1,000 extra on what we'd like to still budget, whether it's meals or something for the kids or whatever. All right, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming. All right, so we do have a couple agenda items before we get to the tax discussion, or the levy. So our first item here is classification comp study, and Mark, I'll let you do the introductions.
Mr. Mayor, thank you, Council. What we're here tonight to do is to present to you sort of the final draft, I'll call it, of the classification and compensation study that was performed by our consultant, Graff. As you mentioned earlier, this is not a forum where we're going to take any action and approve anything, but we'll take any final direction from you on the contents of the report. We think we've dialed it in based on your preliminary feedback from about a month ago or so, and you'll hear some of the details of the report tonight. Then, we'll get into a little bit of discussion about the implementation of the report, and how we intend, how staff is suggesting that we units and the non-union folks, all in alignment with this study and, how sort of aggressively or not aggressively we approach this and what the consequences of doing that are. So we'll get into those items after Melina is done with her presentation. But with that, I think I'll just hand it over to Melina if you're ready for that.
Excellent. Well, good evening. My name is Melina Halverson Mays. I am a senior consultant with McGrath Human Resources Group, and I want to thank the council and mayor for the opportunity to be here in person and have a dialogue with you on this project. I also want to take the time to say thank you to the city's administration. It's been a wonderful project to work with them on, and I want to say that one of the things that when we started working on this project that was from day one that was discussed with McGrath was the concept of having this be a transparent and an interactive process with the department directors and with the employees. And so there were at different stages of this project, we engaged various individuals of this organization. And I will say that I've been doing this for 12 years, just doing compensation and benefits all across the United States. There are very few organizations that want the level of transparency and level of involvement from the employees that Forest Lake had asked for in this process. And so I think that it really does need to be said out loud that how you decided to work this process. There will be disagreements about the outcomes, but it's been a really, really good process. So my name is, like I said, my name is Melina Halverson Mays. I've been doing this for about 12 years. My background is actually in human resources, about 20 years worth in the chair. But one of the things about our company, and we've been doing this for about 25 years now, is that we not only do compensation and benefits, but we also do some public safety consulting. And so we do have a real good vantage point of what in the world is happening in various aspects of the market, one of which is in public safety. And given that you are a full service community, you offer full services, that came into, that really did become important when we were taking a look at the current wages for your public safety individuals. Just a high level look of what's happening human capital wise currently, because what we are seeing here is in the past 6-7 years or so, there's really been a change in public sector in terms of their human capital. We've got more people that are leaving public sector than we have coming in, and it can be a challenge because then you're having some difficulty with backfilling, and backfilling or the inability to be able to backfill with qualified individuals means that you're going to be paying more in overtime, you're going to be paying more in training costs, you've got a lot more recruitment costs, and it has an impact to operations. And the one thing that you don't want to hear from your constituents, and I know that you've got a lot of them in this room tonight, but you don't want to hear your constituents say that they're feeling that their services are, that their services are necessarily on the decline. And so what we can, this has been we've been watching the staircase, so to speak, for the last 5 years, because it's either been, turnover, silver tsunami, it can be COVID, it's certainly inflation, and it feels like employers are struggling. They continue to struggle to be able to provide competitive and meaningful compensation without there being some recruitment and retention challenges. And you are up against like almost a brick wall. Now, I will say that there are some pockets that are starting to see a little bit of relief, but that's not necessarily everywhere. In communities such as Forest Lake, you're experiencing some growth. People are leaving the city, they're trying to come into this area, and so you continue to have a need for continued operations. And so that does compound your issue to make sure that you keep all of your positions filled. So with that in mind, big picture, let's take a look at Forest Lake. This is all of your employees. We have clustered them, plotted them on 2 different graphs. The one on the far left shows all of your employees and how long they've been with the organization. And on average, your city, your employees have been there for 9.7 years. The national average is just over 6 years. You're beating the national average. That's a good thing. But you can see that you've got some spikes and you've got some valleys in there. And when we compare then on the right-hand side of the screen, the right-hand side of the screen is the same age banding that we have going on and the percentage employees that actually are in that age band. And what we can see here is that you have a lot of long tenured individuals who are in their 60s. They're going to be retiring up pretty soon. They're going to be age eligible or time eligible in the state retirement system to go, and they are going to go. But we want to take a look at the 50s and the 60-year-olds because those of us who are in our 50s, we are already starting to think about retirement as well. So as a community, as a city, what you have to look forward to here is that about 1/3 of your workforce, they're going to get ready to retire. And you need to be able to backfill those positions with competitive wages, right? To be able to refill those positions. The other thing that you have going on this chart here is that over 1/3 of your workforce is under the age of 40. That's a real mobile generation, and they are willing to go work for more dollars per hour. They're not really caring about benefits or anything of that nature, but they might go work at the community next door for an extra $1 an hour, just as an example, for that reason. And they won't tie to you. The challenge that you have is that you can't really develop succession planning. You can grow and develop them, you can put resources into them, and then they leave. And they take all of the resource that you just provided into them, and they take it with them to the community next door. And those individuals, if you look at that is 35% of your workforce, and they have less than 4 years of service. So your city as a whole, you're looking at a retention challenge, and you're looking at a recruitment challenge. So you have to look at it, or I would recommend that you look at it from both lenses. So with that in mind, let's talk about your study and what we found. When we started this process, we met with your administration, we talked with your department directors, we did a paper review of your job descriptions, your compensation system, all of your policies, and then we did go out to the external market. We're going to talk about that here in a little bit, and we asked employees to complete what's called a position questionnaire document. That tells us directly from the employees what it is that we're doing for our job responsibilities, so we could further analyze that information, okay? And I guess we'll just kind of keep going here. We went out to your public comparables. Now, this list of comparables was provided from the city. It wasn't anything that McGrath selected. These are communities that the city has historically used to compare yourselves against in other, in terms of services, programs, previous compensation. So this was a set listing. So this is very consistent with what you have historically done, and we continue to follow suit with those communities. And when we analyze that data, what we do is we take a look at all of their respective like positions. We look at their minimum, their midpoint, and their maximums, so we could see how Forest Lakes ranges look against all of those other comparables salary ranges. And then we also collect a fourth data point, which is incumbent data. That incumbent data then allows us to compare, for example, how much your police officers are earning against actual other police officers in those other organizations. And when we analyze the data, we put it into what's called a comp ratio. It's a comparison ratio. It compares you against the entire data set, and we stack you up against how in the world you're doing. We want that number to be as close as 50 as possible. 50 means market in this case, okay? And I've done some simplification for you. We've color coded it, and I'm going to show you, I'll walk you through the minimums here in just to show you as an example. What this graph shows you is how the city's published minimums, your wages, are looking like against those other communities, okay? And blue is good. Blue means that you are at a 50% comp ratio or above, and that is 50% of your positions that are aligned at the minimums. 11% of your positions are very, very close. By my standards, I would say They would be market competitive but in actuality to the market, they may or may not be, which is why we color code them differently. We consider them at risk. 40%, and I know that this does not add up to 100, we've got rounding, 40% of your positions are not aligned to the market minimum, okay? So that's what your minimums look like. Now next, I want to take a look at your midpoint. And what you can see here is now in your blue area, you still have a strong presence in the blue, but you're starting to lose a little bit of ground. You've got more that are going into the at-risk. You're still at about 40% that are under the market. And then with your maximums, you again continue to lose ground there, although you've got more at risk than under market. Overall, what this tells me is that you have a number of your positions that are doing well against the external comparable market. When you see the recommendations, you're going to notice that not all positions are substantively moving. That was a conversation that I had with your employees today. I had a meeting with department directors and I had a meeting with the employees just to introduce to them the outcomes of this as well. So they are aware that not every position is going to be recommended for substantial movement. But that with that said, there still is a fair number of positions that do require movement in order for the city to be realigned with the competitive market, okay? One of the other things that we took a look at is your current salary systems as well. Now I understand that that there is a heavy presence of collective bargaining here in the city, and that is that is completely okay. When I do studies, however, I'm looking at it from a citywide perspective. When you collectively bargain, you're bargaining in a silo with those respective organizations, and I'm saying I want you to take a bigger picture. This is, it's a systems issue, it's a citywide issue. There's some inconsistency amongst what you have here, and that makes sense given that you've collectively bargained them all individually. But there's some differences here that really are very impactful to whether or not you've got certain data points that are hitting the market or not hitting the market. And that inconsistency almost feels like inequity when you're talking about employees and their compensation. So one of the recommendations that we have, and it's a pretty big recommendation for the city, it's a pretty significant change, is that we've put everybody on, or all positions on, one unified salary schedule. That is our first and foremost recommendation. No longer should you have those 6, but you should have one salary structure, and I'll show you what that looks like here in just a moment. The ranges that I'm presenting to you in the final report, they are average to the market. What that means is amongst all of those comparables, what I've done is I've put Forest Lake in the middle, right in the midpoint, okay? That means 50% of those communities are still going to continue to pay more than Forest Lake. That is, generally speaking, where most communities try to position themselves within their market, is right around the average, okay? So that's where you are going to see those ranges. I have adjusted those ranges for 2026, which means that if this is something that the city is going to implement, you don't need to make any further adjustments. It simply gets implemented with the ranges that are in place today. There is a little bit of a shift in the structure. So not only is there one model, but instead of having 5 steps, which the majority of your models currently are 5 steps, we are now we've recommended 6 steps, and a little bit of a lesser value for most steps. A lot of your steps are 5%, and we're actually pulling those down to 4%, okay? So 6 steps at a 4% value, and that means maybe a little bit of a change for the law enforcement longevity, which is part of the collective bargaining process. This is what the recommended salary structure looks like. If you want to see a visual of that, all the positions have been placed anywhere from pay grade 80 to pay grade 155, and all of those steps are annualized. I spent a little bit of time today with your staff talking with them about position placement and how in the world I can put a My example today was how can I put someone from Public Works, a position in Public Works in the same pay grade as a support position in administration and finance. And, we use multiple factors when we are looking to place positions. Number one is the external market, but, we also have to take a look at that position analysis process. Minnesota is a pay equity state. We do have to make sure that there is objective, measurable differences between the positions and those respective pay grades. Internal comparability is also a factor. Then you've got compression separation, because you want to make sure that your positions do have proper separation for that career leveling. We want for people to want to move up in the organization so that is your succession planning. We want those levels to be in place. The last part that I want to just high level talk about, and then if you have any questions for me, I'd love to talk about them, is managing the system, because what this is it's really a complete reset of the structure that you have today. And I know that that there's a bargaining process that goes with this. But after that then is really, how the council is going to, manage this with administration going forward. And my recommendation is that you have an identified economic indicator that you utilize each year, and you be consistent about that economic indicator so that you're not varying that year after year. I think the other big takeaway on this particular slide is the market updates. It's been a volatile market. It's been, quite frankly, and those of us in HR, that's what we call it. It's been a volatile market for the past 5 years. And I think things are going to start to settle out now. But there are always going to be blips in the radar. I can go back for the past 10, 12 years and I can talk about all of the trends that have happened, and they happen every few years. You're going to have a pocket of positions that really are a struggle for you to be able to recruit and retain. And if you do a market update, it does not have to be quite as extensive as what it did for you. But if you do a market update every 3 to 5 years, that will help keep you aligned with the market in smaller increments where you're not going to necessarily have big spikes. The longer you wait, the more time you're trying to make up, and sometimes that might come with some extra dollars. So that will be a recommendation that you'll see in the body of the final report as well. With that, I'd love to talk about questions.
Just a big question that comes to my mind is, what does it look like to go from 6 bargaining units to 1 salary schedule?
Yeah, that's Mr. Mayor and Council, that is an excellent question. We have 6 bargaining units, if you will, 5 in a non-union contingent, and that's going to be a challenge. I think essentially we have 2 LELS unions that are up for their contract ends at the end of this year. May also decided to go with a 1-year contract, and they'll let theirs expire as well, so we'll be fully bargaining all 3 of those contracts. Then we have reopeners in the other 2 that anticipated the study and to reopen a negotiation just on salaries, so that reopens. So we have the opportunity to negotiate all 5 union groups. The message is going to be fairly simple, which is that we've done the study, we've spent an awful lot of time, energy, and money getting the study done and done right, and that is the comparable data that we're going to be looking at, and we're anticipating just a very fair conversation with them about this is the market data. The city council wants to pay the market data. I can project on what you might decide. We'd be glad to entertain anything else, but I can't imagine I'll have anything more thorough than what we've done here, right, in terms of market research. And we're hopeful that the negotiations can go quickly, because oftentimes you come to the bargaining table and you've got your list of cities that you're looking at, and you've got their cherry-picked ones, and you can cherry-pick, and you meet in the middle somewhere, and it's a little dance you do. And but here we've kind of got a list of cities that we've long established, and we've done an excellent job of market research. And I think unions often just want to make sure that they're being paid at market rate, and I hope we can have that short conversation.
Mr. Mayor, if I could just add, our labor attorney is also very in favor of us moving to 1 salary schedule for equity purposes, because it's much easier to show that the positions are aligned in an equitable fashion when we're on one schedule. I think if you recall that slide that Milena showed, we're kind of all over the place with these 5 schedules right now. So bringing it into one schedule is going to be beneficial for our bargaining units as well, because they're going to see where they are in relation to other positions and other bargaining units. But also for the pay equity purposes, we have mandatory pay equity reporting the city has to do. This one schedule is going to be incredibly beneficial for those purposes as well.
Those initial conversation with staff, how did those go? Favorable, not so much?
Earlier today.
Yes.
A lot of questions. I think that, you know, and I don't want to speak on behalf of the employees, and sometimes it's difficult to really know, you know, what they're thinking, right? When we're in the meetings, they ask some genuinely good questions. I think that you're going to have some that are favorable, and then you will have some that are, you know, might be disappointed in the outcomes because they felt that maybe their positions would receive more than what the recommendations are establishing.
I think it's tough, if I may, Mr. Mayor, you know, it could be tough when you see this study and you see that if you're getting a substantial raise, that feels good to you. If you're a person who's gonna have a pay freeze for 2 years because your salary is currently over the market, that doesn't feel good to you. But in a sense, those feelings should be opposite, because the person who's been over the market has been being paid over the market for the past however many years. Where the person who's getting a substantial raise has been underpaid and should feel a bit let down by the city that they've been undervalued for however many years. And that's money we're not gonna repay them in arrears, right? And so it's a tough, and I'm not saying that would be any different, you know, in their position. It's a human nature to feel that way. But I think for the most part, I think we went painstakingly through this to try to have as little pain as possible and stick true to the data, right? And so we did I think a very good job in guiding our matrix, our pay matrix, and grading folks in a way that puts as little movement as we can without getting away from what the data really tells us about where we were. I think what you saw up there, if you really study the graphs that Milena put up there, she looked at the minimums, the midpoints, and the maximums. And as you went from minimum to midpoint to maximum, it got worse in terms of we were underpaying people the further we got out, right? So which means our minimums were good, our midpoints weren't bad, but our maximums were lacking a bit, right? And so, and that can be important in the market, because the market doesn't necessarily care what the minimum is, or the midpoint even. Oftentimes people are looking at what's the max salary, especially when you look at people who, such as public works or police, especially police, I would say quickly go to the max. What can I max out at in my 3 to 5 years or whatever, any particular city? Some cities only have 3 steps and you're maxed out, right? So officers often want to look at what's the maximum, right? So we wanted to align our table with the midpoint, but at the same time we wanted to make sure our maximums weren't lagging behind the market as well. And so we had to flex that a bit. Initially we looked at a certain flex, and that sent our minimums too low. We would have trouble attracting new people to come here because starting salaries were too low. So we looked at a different strategy to sort of align both the midpoint and the maximum with the market as closely as possible. And I think what that also ends up doing is just makes it such that most of our employees will see a modest increase, you know, requisite with the market that they are a part of. There will unfortunately be some folks that will need to take a pay freeze of sorts, if you want to call it that. It'll be a little bit different than that, but and that will resolve itself. Looks like within 2 years we'll be able to. You know, we don't have anyone that's so far overpaid that we're going to need to track this out for 5 years. But you know, bottom line is I think we have a very well thought out matrix here to apply to that study, and we're happy to roll it out. And I hope we'll have an overall positive outcome for the employees.
Remind me, maybe these numbers been shared, but this effect on percentage wise, and what is, do we have a number of that yet?
What I would say is that the budget that's been proposed at 12.6% has enough in it to cover what we're proposing based on the study. So the anticipated amount that we put into the budget matches fairly closely with what is presented in the study and what staff is suggesting as a rollout for the plan. So in other words, we can do all the things that are in your budget within the 12.6% that's proposed today. And as you'll see later in the agenda tonight, if we want to lower that, lowering our salary standards, so to speak, is not on the top of our list. We'd like to see us get our pay up to the market and perhaps have fewer employees or do fewer things rather than try to maintain the staff count and pay less, right? I think that is a worse strategy than getting ourselves to the market and having a few fewer employees if we want to lower that.
You were Ellie, do you recall what percentage of that 12, what we were talking, as you think about that, I just want to get back on a comment you made early on around part of the reason of doing this is recognizing that, you know, there is certain demographics that are fairly mobile. And they come here and they get great training and they move on.
I do.
And I think we've seen that quite a bit in our police force. if I
Yes.
recall. There's a lot of turnover. And there's a lot of cost to the training, specifically with that
Very much.
group of employees.
Very much.
Correct.
Absolutely. In fact, I would say, especially in public safety ends up being one of the most expensive. When we talk about turnover rates and what the cost to turn a position, we, especially when it comes to public safety, it's typically about 1.5, even upwards of 2 times the cost of the position by the time you're talking about a payout, recruitment, overtime to cover, the vacancy, the training, the new equipment, and you could just keep going. And all of those dollars, they walk out the door when that person walks out the door. Yeah, it's very expensive to your organization. And so if you're going to expend those dollars, you reallocate them into the salaries so that you don't have to bleed those dollars out in other line items like overtime and payouts and recruitment costs and training costs. Now, training is a good thing, continuing education is a good thing, but you don't want to do it to try to just keep the minimum staffing going.
I think that's a great point, and that's, really, I know some of you might have this in front of you of some alternatives and some cost per positions. These are the challenges that we look at. I mean, we are losing people to Woodbury. It took us almost a year to hire a building official, and we had to actually up that dollar amount to get more traction to this job. And so these are the challenges that we're dealing with when we're looking at these budget numbers. It's not any more comfortable for us than you, but that's just the reality of it. So thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah, I'm sorry, as a percentage of the whole thing, I don't know if we can tell you what this particular implementation is, other than, I know what percentage we put into the budget, and, it's in line with those percentages. Okay.
All right, thank you.
Questions? So next steps then.
Next steps would be that we'll bring to you that matrix you saw. I keep calling it a matrix, that is what I'm familiar with calling it.
Schedule.
Grades and steps, scale, wage scale, and we'll have you adopt that along with some guidance on how to implement that and sort of negotiating strategy at the next meeting. Part of that may be in closed session, part of it not, we'll have to work that out. But essentially we'll have you adopt whatever portion of the study we feel that we should really formally get on board with. The study is no requirement to legally adopt the study, but we obviously we need to know, is this what we're on board with, and is this what we're negotiating with going forward? So, and from there, Julian and I already have a number of our negotiating sessions lined up in early November. We're going to try to knock out as many as we can before that January one. I really want to continue to make it a goal of ours to be negotiated through those union contracts by January 1 as much as possible. I understand it's a lofty goal, but I both sides, and I think we're gonna make some good progress.
Thank you
You're welcome.
for presenting and your work on this and being here this evening.
Thank you.
Next item, review of the big 3 street reconstruction projects.
Mr. Mayor, I think, you're more than welcome to, stick with the agenda as these folks have lots of interest in the next couple items, if they should. But also, no problem if you wanna skip to the budget discussion, up to you.
That's council, is that?
There's some big numbers attached to these road projects.
Yeah.
They should see it, beneficial for everybody to really know, should see it, know what's going. What's going in, it's not just $50 million public work projects.
Yeah.
It's sewer lines and water mains and unstable.
I'm just gonna stand up here if that's all right, so if you guys wanna adjust. Mayor, City Council, tonight, we're just gonna have a really early preliminary conversation about what we're referring to as the big three that's outlined in the capital improvement plan. These are future larger road reconstruction projects, and no work is being started on any of them at this point in time because of the significance of the projects and the amount of work that would need to be going in each and every one. That's why we want to come so early to you guys to talk about these. So the actual construction of these projects are identified in the capital improvement plan right now. That would start with major construction in 2028. That would take it to 2032 if completed as presented tonight. We will present them in order how they're laid out in the CIP, so that's why the order they are.
Right, what's the CIP?
Capital improvement plan?
It's in the budget.
Yep. So overview. We just want to review the proposed street projects, like we talked about, some potential scopes within them, timing, and just some really high level planning, level cost estimates. Review some of the key issues that each of the projects have. They're all very, very uniquely different than each other. And then really just determine council's priority for the future moving forward on these three projects. So here's the three proposed street projects. One is North Shore Drive and North Shore Trail, combining the two projects. That would go all the way from US Highway 61 to 235th Street North. Current last traffic counts that we have are right here, 3100 to 4550. So we do traffic counts every 4 years, and that's kind of been a little transition here on resetting their system, but just know that we're gonna be required to do our traffic counts on our state aid roads in 26. Usually that takes a pretty long process because they'll be submitted, then they get reviewed, and they're always gonna have redos they're gonna want you to do, so a process basically will take the whole entire 2026 year. And then 12th Street Southwest, that would go all the way from Broadway Avenue down to County Road 32 or 11th Avenue, just right out here. You can see the traffic there. AT stands for annual average daily traffic. And why the two have the ranges is because there's different points in the road, there's different counts, so that's why we show you the range. Hero Avenue would be from Trunk Highway 97 and down to 208th Street North, so just past the entrance of the two developments, Greenway development and Chestnut Creek. And you know that one, you know, you've heard from some residents, traffic's really bad. When you look at the traffic count, it seems really, really low, right? It's a lot lower than what you think is out there. Traffic counts are taken during the school year, so you're obviously not capturing the busy golf traffic from Forest Hills, the golf course there. I have looked back at some older ones, and there were much higher ones in the 750, so it'll be unique what we see in the 2026 traffic counts in that area. You know, in that part of town, there's been a lot of construction projects as well with the two roundabouts at 97 and 61, so a lot of detour traffic, you know, that comes into play sometimes with traffic counts, so.
What's that passer rate?
Oh, good question. So each year, we go out, drive the roads, and put everything on a map rated 1 through 10. It's a pacer rating system. Very easy, simple for you guys to have a visual with a color to a 9 to 10, 7 to 8, 5 to 6, 3 to 4. and then, your two lower, right? So obviously these are lower rated roads and, the condition that they're currently in.
Ryan, a question on the Harrow, maybe you'll talk about, is that contemplating traffic control change at 97 roundabout or anything, or?
No, that does not include any improvements on the trunk highway other than tying into it. So, we can get into that a little more, definitely get there.
Just Ryan, if I could just interject too, as Councilmember Erickson mentioned, these are projects that are currently in the CIP, so they're in the capital improvement plan going forward. Our budget that we have, not only projected for this year, but the projected budgets going forward, account for these projects, set the numbers that Ryan can share with you. Tonight's discussion is about whether or not those should be moved up, moved back, scaled up, scaled down, which one takes priority. And to be further clear, these are the projects that are on our local road system, including our state aid road system. This does not include our investments our share of the investments in Highway 97, County 32, 11th Avenue, any work on Highway 61 and that corridor there. So anything and or 61 through town, all of those things are outside of this, also in the CIP and also accounted for to the best of our knowledge at this juncture. But I just kind of wanted to set the stage for these are not new projects, right? We're reevaluating whether or not these should be in the place that they are on the CIP.
All right, first area we're gonna talk about in more depth here, is North Shore Drive and Trail. So it's North Shore Drive from US 61 to Greenway, and then from Greenway to 235th is North Shore Trail. We actually read that? So we'll go in some of the slides, later slides, but there we're kind of just talking about the scope of the work that's gonna be included in that estimate that was prepared. Now, without doing any preliminary survey, geotechnical work, reviewing what is actually there for existing right-of-way easements, project scope could change, on some of that moving forward once you get into the more of a design scenario. They're trying to use a high-level cost and, for budgeting purposes and discussion at this point in time. So project scope, we obviously would come in with a full reconstruction of North Shore Drive and Trail. Trail, obviously we've had a lot of recent conversations, pulled that out of the project that was completed this year, with a look at, incorporating pedestrian facilities with that project. Now in the North Shore Drive area from US 61 to Greenway, we certainly can look at the road guides, but we'll go through that with the public outreach portion of that project. How important is on-street parking, right? If everybody says, we only want it on one side, well, that's a game changer, right? Maybe the full-front shrinks. Obviously, you have sidewalk out there that has to be removed and replaced. It's 4 feet, 5 feet at best in areas. Every slope up and down doesn't meet ADA compliance. So the walkability and the safety in that area is obviously a concern. And that's where we would look at, the trail, if we could fit a trail there, like we talked about, and I could come all the way up to US 61 and then continue to go, part of the project. There's a lot of sanitary and water main replacement that's gonna be needed in that corridor, existing stuff, and we've done some sanitary sewer studies a long time ago where we know we have some capacity issues in some areas, size of pipe, slope of the pipe. And water main in that area has a lot of needs and replacement. A lot of that infrastructure in that area has been built anywhere from 1957 to, on the way in, get up to 2003. But in between is a lot of 60s of underground utility work. You can just imagine a lot of the conditions and situations that Public Works is dealing with. This area does have some lead water main, so that's something we'll talk about, further here too. Also was constructed prior to any watershed rules and requirements, so now that we're going to a full reconstruction project, that would trigger all the stormwater permitting requirements, water quality, rate control, volume control, so that would be constructing something to be able to achieve that, whether it's underground stormwater mechanisms or purchasing property and constructing and acquisitions at this time is not known, because no real depth work has been done. We've identified a handful of properties along North Shore Trail with previous discussions, so we know that there would be some work that would have to go further in the research to see if there's any things attached to the properties and the deeds and stuff like that, but private utility relocations can be a significant impact in this area. Obviously, you know, when we talked about when we wanted to potentially put a trail along North Shore Trail, how that then has a snowball effect. You know, you gotta relocate the power poles farther out, and then, you know, the tree canopy gets touched. But alternatively, on the backside of that, we'll work with the private utility companies and obtain estimates on what it would cost to bear it to. And so it might be one of those decisions in a project that has a higher expense, and then other things are taken out of the project, or it's something that affects the timeline of the project, because that becomes a higher need than overhead power lines and power poles. So then therefore we wouldn't affect treatment, right? Currently, it's identified for 2028-29 construction, the bulk of the work occurring in 28, but knowing all the things that this project would have to go through is why you would want to start it in 26 if you were going to achieve a 28 construction major project. Because in 26 and 27, we definitely would want to go through a lot of public outreach, and then get going pretty fully in depth with the right-of-way research and acquisition. You know, you do the preliminary survey very early, just to get the project boundaries and limits, and geotechnical investigation too. We would go out and do soil borings, and we would actually do test pits with this too. And then the design and just the permitting of this project. Obviously, you're gonna have a lot of things to work through with the watershed. You got the dam, so a lot of different things with this project. And then if it was majority of the project constructed in 28, then you come back and let it go through a freeze-thaw cycle, because this project would require significant water and sewer replacements, so we'll have some pretty deep trenches with this project. And so therefore you let it sit for sure one winter freeze-thaw cycle, and then we come back in 29 and pay that final lift or wear course, do the final striping, any restoration that wasn't achieved yet, and all the final punch lists. High-level planning cost estimate for these two segments of roadways combined are just under $18 million. You can see the breakout between the two roadway sections. Key project issues, some pros for doing the project. Obviously the road rating, the deteriorated utilities, the water system extension, and eliminate over a half a mile of identified lead-bearing water main, and that would be approximately 100 residential services in this area that would be taken care of. Sanitary sewer capacity would be addressed with that project, and then your trail system extension, you could have some more local connectivity, safer areas for families to use, pedestrian facilities versus on the road through this area. And we would now complete the project of North Shore Drive and Trail all the way from US 61 with this year's project. It would take you all the way to 97, right? And then we would not be back for 20 some years, other than just some maintenance stuff like crack filling and seal coating. Some cons with the project: adjacent construction, US Highway 8. Full reconstruction project is tentatively dialed in now from 27 to 29. Still working through some environmental approvals on that project and funding. Right-of-way acquisition for the trail and stormwater treatments, and we're going to be impacting something somewhere, somebody. So we'll have to work through those to get the project permitted. Wetland impact mitigation, we'll have to deal with some wetland impacts, especially out by North Shore Trail area where the project, it is wide enough to account for pedestrian facilities. You're gonna have long detours. There's not really other places to get in and out with the lake on one side and Highway 8 on another, and then a lot of the wetlands, right? So it's something that's gonna have to be well communicated with the residents. Whether it's above ground relocation of power lines or underground, there's gonna be a significant amount of private utility relocations with this project. If it does stay above ground, you know, we definitely would affect some tree canopy areas, just to get enough distance off the private utility lines. And anywhere we would look at widening the road, you're gonna potentially be dealing with some landscaping driveway features that are right out to beyond probably what your right of way area were established in some of these areas with the long driveways. Here's just some, a couple project pictures. On the north is the North Shore Drive area where I talked about earlier. If the property owner supports on-street parking or on one side, two sides, that's how you could change the potential width of the road. As you can see, the very narrow sidewalk on the right side of the top slide. We would definitely, minimum would be 6 feet, but if we wanted to come out of the trail, that's where we would start coming into the, probably the footprint of the road and have that road down at probably narrower lanes. Because at the end of the day, if the road stays that wide too, that's just how much impervious area we're gonna have to treat for our stormwater permitting area. We can shrink it, those requirements go down a little just because the surface area is smaller, right? And then the slot on the bottom is North Shore Trail. We've kind of gone over that quite a bit prior to you guys approving the project that's being constructed this summer. You can see the power lines up next to the trees now, and if they were to relocate, just the angle of the wires where they go is gonna potentially have impacts on trees, landscaping, and other items through that corridor. You guys got any projects or questions about the North Shore area? Otherwise, we'd be heading into the next area. Next area we'll talk about is 12th Street Southwest. Again, that project limits would be from Broadway, County State Highway 2, all the way down to 11th Avenue, or County State Highway 32. Now just notes, there's a purpose these two circles are here, because there will be references roundabouts later, just so you know, it's nothing that's been supported by a traffic study at this point. It was purely just a conceptual layout that we've done in the past, to have conversations with developers along 12 streets in the past with some previous projects. And I think they actually were done in 2014-15, right? So just purely created for discussion purposes, but we'd be looking at full reconstruction in this area. Obviously that would include the curb and gutter. Again, this is another area in town that was built prior to stormwater rules and requirements, so 12th Street Southwest would be required to meet the rules and requirements of the watershed district when it comes to stormwater permitting. We'll obviously go through a number of different alternatives for discussion at the public level for this project area, because access is gonna be a hot topic. We've already written that into development agreements with some of the newer commercial businesses that are ongoing, and or some of that are in the queue with looking to obtain site plan approval on future projects, knowing that that could be a potential, that there would be a median down 12th Street at certain spots, certain distances leading into a potential roundabout at Walmart's or 3rd Avenue Southwest. So it's conversations we've had and just trying to prepare for long-term future. That's why we've written it into some development agreements with projects along there. Private utilities, again, they would obviously be a relocation efforts, even though the majority of that stuff's underground now, but with that, the stormwater permitting utility replacement, you're gonna get into a lot of areas where they're gonna have to temporarily relocate anyway so you can do the work, because there is a lot of spaghetti noodles underground under 12 streets. It's kind of what, if you could just look through the pavements, you would see a lot of different wires here and there and pipes going all over the place, and the age of that infrastructure is pretty old on the north of 3rd Avenue too. So. Currently, as identified on the capital improvement plan, major construction is outlined for 2030. This project, you would start the other things that we talked about here in 29, public outreach, right away, survey, and geotech work, and then design and permitting leading up to that construction year 2030. And then again, because of the type of work that's would be needed with this type of project, you would then wait a year to pay the final wear course or the final lift bituminous the following year, final striping and restoration punch list. High level planning estimate for this project is just under $12 million. I think it was from 3rd Street Southwest to 11th Avenue, or County State Highway 32, that was gonna be part of the 2029 project. Remember that went through the feasibility phase with 15th Street Southwest, 12th Street fell off, and 15th Street came back several years later, and I'll get to probably why that came back several years later. In one of our last slides, when we talked about the assessment policy. Key project issues, pros, for doing the project. Again, this is a low-rated roadway. You got deteriorating utilities. When I say utilities, I'm referring to sanitary sewer, water main, and storm sewer that are underground public utilities. Obviously, we have a sidewalk in one side of the area. It doesn't meet ADA compliance, very narrow, right off the back of curb to a lot of traffic all day long. So, the project would try to look at how pedestrian facilities could be supported on both sides of the roadway. Obviously, that comes down to what impact the final design of the road needs, from a traffic movements purposes, and or what resistance or ability it is to acquire property with a project like this. Now, some business owners might be very supportive of property acquisition because they want more foot traffic to their commercial front door. Some might not because they might have future plans that they just don't know yet and hard to make a decision. Cons, County State Highway 32 project is slated for 2027 to 28. We do have Washington County. They're not coming to talk about that one. That's a different one. So they're not talking about 32, but it's 50. Obviously, the right-of-way acquisition for the street improvements and stormwater treatment that would be required for permitting. Obviously, this project is going to have significant traffic and business impacts. So this will be comparable to the downtown roundabout project for business impacts because you don't have as much width as the county project did with Broadway, where they could shift traffic all to one side. Maybe that's something that the project looks at too, but the county had more right of way than we do on 12th Street. So, and then with that, because the type of project and all the impacts that they have, this is one of those projects I would anticipate night construction. The downtown roundabout, the city did approve 24-hour construction project. We were basically running 2 crews, 12-hour shifts, and created, I don't remember exactly offhand, but it was 18 or 19 weeks of construction, start to finish. It was crazy. Here's just some pictures of the area where we talk about some of the constraints. You can see on one side of the road, there's no pedestrian facilities. The other side, it's got the narrower sidewalk right off the back of curb. Continuous flow of traffic. One thing to get a good feel of this project, I always just recommend people go grab their lunch or dinner and before one of our meetings and go sit in that little knockout area of our south of Arby's, where it's extended parking lot of Walmart's that goes way from the store right up to 12. Just sit there and just watch. Watch how many chances people take to try to find a gap in traffic to go either northbound, southbound, or what out of that area. So it's there's a lot of close calls there. I know we've had one fatality. It's been a while ago now, but there has been one fatality on this corridor. The last road segment we'll talk about tonight, Harrow Avenue. So project limits that we'll be talking about are from Highway 97 and just south of where the entrance is at 208th developments on the east side of Harrow Avenue, and on the west side is Chestnut Creek. You see the phase one. We've been involved with the discussion of phase two. That's going for preliminary plat approval, and then if land continues to the south, develop, they're gonna bring that sewer up, and then all that land north of Chestnut Creek is ready to go with, the buyers, owners have that now. It's a project scope by Harrow Avenue. It'd be a full reconstruction. Could be curb and gutter, could not. I anticipate it'd be curb and gutter because the amount of wetlands and the golf course is on the east side and the wetlands on the west side, so you're gonna wanna probably do what MnDOT ended up having to do from a permitting standpoint on 97. Curb and gutter allows you to shrink your footprint up instead of having a long clear zone and slopes coming off the road. And obviously nothing's set in stone with any of these roadways. If alternative design and curb and gutter makes sense, it's definitely something that would be recommended and supported. There's a sanitary force main reroutes that could occur if the development to the south of Chestnut Creek occurred and brought up the sanitary sewer trunk main, so we can basically direct a lot of sanitary sewer in this area. So with the Chestnut Creek phase one, there's a stub force main right out to Harrow Avenue that at the time Harrow Avenue gets redone, all the greenway developments force main will connect into that, not take it all the way up to Highway 97 and back around and down by the high school. It'll actually go south and down to the trunk lines that had been brought up, started in 2004 was the first extension. Then with Halpern Heights, he brought it even a little further. That was 2008, 2009. And then now it's been sitting there waiting for the next development. We got Amberley Woods right there, now they're coming in, so that's there's potential that very constructive on that one. This is another road. It's kind of your famous old rural road that was a shape and pave. I threw a little extra gravel on it, and paved it, and then we did another overlay in 2014, and even cracked one since. So there's really no full section to this roadway, no shoulders. It's your old school rural roadway. Maybe we're a little over 24 feet wide, but not much if we are. This project would obviously require some right-of-way acquisition. If it were to wait until everything was developed out there, do some of that platting on the west side of Harrow Avenue, you're gonna require that of the developer to, provide some of that right-of-way for future projects. So potentially right-of-way costs could be much lower or in the future because of that. If you could require that through the planning process that we normally always do anyways through a plat process, get that future right-of-way to allow those main roadways to go to their needs. Private utility relocations would be required in here. They're your traditional whatever distance right off the edge of the road right now, and they just run that way. Obviously, we'll widen the road. They're gonna have to be moved, if not potentially buried here too. Process must obtain from the private utility companies what that would take. Once we start getting out to this area too, and the density in a lot of these areas that are fed with the overhead power lines, that's where we have a lot of issues during storms. The more that you can achieve with underground burial, that does reduce the number of outages we would have with future storms too. Currently, the project is identified for major construction for 2031, and because of the scope of the work and same items that we talked about, the other projects, you would do the final workhorse in 1 year later. High-level planning estimate for that corridor there is just under 10. Project key issues. We've got a deteriorating road again. If you were able to do it all at the same time that sewer was already brought up in the south, you could relocate that force main, which is going to then provide more capacity for other areas of the system where we're redirecting existing capacity through a planned area that we're waiting on future developments. We definitely extend water main on Harrow Avenue with this project. That would then provide a nice future looping it's currently, it's just, there's not even shoulders out there, and the pedestrians just walk down the side of the road. This project would look to achieve, constructing a trail on one side of the roadway for sure. And then just having the street improvements done prior to other potential future housing developments. Cons, the Trunk Highway 61, County Road 50 intersection project that the county is pursuing for a 28 construction project. That would be going on right at that time period. It wouldn't go earlier, but they've been successful on obtaining some other funding, so you know if everything stays in dates, we would obviously miss each other, but if their project gets delayed, then it pushes into that time frame that's for the local project. Gonna need right-of-way acquisition for trail and stormwater treatments. There's gonna be wetland impact mitigations along this corridor. Con can't reroute that forest main though until that property to the southwest develops. There's just some pictures of that existing corridor. You can see how tight the roadway is. You know, nowhere for pedestrians to go, even though a lot of them do walk it, especially in the evenings. You got landscape fencing along the golf course. It runs pretty close. So that's, you know, other things that would have to be looked at here. In project design, does a trail get on the side of the golf course? Then you gotta provide shielding for pedestrians, you know, that's just all the things that we would be talking about. You can see bottom left picture, you got wetlands on the left, and you got the golf course ditch, and then the fairway, you know, right on the other side of the tree, so very tight corridor. Just kind of big picture, this is where these three projects fall in your existing capital improvement plan. You can see the Highway 8 projects, where we have some local participation on some work there, and then just some of our other projects that are ongoing. Just wanted to provide this slide just so you can see how everything is kind of connected, big picture. Okay, now just jump into this quickly, right? So obviously the city has a roadway assessment policy. High level summary is that because these are full reconstruction projects, your assessment policy currently says you would go in and you would follow the 429 process. You would assess a minimum 20% to the property owners, and the city would cover the remaining 80%. We also have language in there too, like if we're oversizing a road over and beyond our residential roadway, they're still the only responsible for 20% of a typical residential roadway. So like North Shore Drive, let's say we get a little wider, you know, than a 32-foot, 34 back-to-back curb. They'd be responsible for that 34 foot. So with 15 streets, that's what we did too, is we have a typical section of a normal, typical commercial, industrial road reconstruction section that they'd be responsible for that. And if 12th Street is 4 lanes, right, they're still responsible for the equivalence of the typical standard commercial industrial roadway. But there's been a lot of conversation on this roadway assessment policy. It's probably something that we're gonna have to revisit. Is it gonna be an assessed project? How is the project gonna be ultimately funded? So that's something I just wanna bring up now because as it states today, because these are full road reconstruction, we would be assessing that at a minimum rate of 20%. Typically, that's a 15-year term.
Is that 20% is that contemplated in that CIP? That assessment or not an assessment?
I don't believe that revenue is probably contemplated in there, right?
I would say no, just because of previous finance staff that we've worked with on the budget stuff, they haven't asked for that because we haven't really known how to fund it 100%. So, you know, that's something that you're gonna get dialed in
part of that is that even if we assess, we would end up fronting the money and then allow it payback over the course of 10, 15, 20 years, depending on how much we're assessing people. And so you really only get 1/10, 1/15, 1/20th of that every year. So in the 10-year cycle we're looking at, the revenue is, maybe a fifth of that 20%, right? So you're talking about 20% of 20%, so.
Because we're not gonna bond grants projects.
Some of these are bonded for, and so that's calculated in the CIP, so you don't see a $17 million impact in 1 year, you see that stretch out. So yeah, I think all three of these are bonded, does that ring a bell, Ryan, or?
Yes.
So these are all planned for bonds. And that's up for discussion too, right? We could delay these, save for them, and pay for them with cash. I've always tried to explain, that thought process that like we all do that at home, right? We try to save for stuff and then buy it when we have all the money. I think sometimes in this context, it does make more sense to bond for larger projects because the people who enjoy the project, so to speak, are the ones who pay for it. So if you pave a road and then pay for it over the next 20 years, the people who use the brand new paved road are the people paying for it, as opposed to the previous 20 years of people saving for it. And then you pave it, those people might move in, move out, die, and they never get to use that road, right? It's a horse and piece, you can do it either way. I think just it's a philosophical, choice you make.
So just in summary, outline the three projects we talked about, high-level cost estimates. And really the next question is, does the council have an alternative project priority sequence? Is the timing of the projects as outlined in the capital improvements in line with future goals and needs and supported? Or do adjustments need to be made and more information on that?
Well, I guess my concern with North Shore Trail timing is the highway, what the overlap's gonna be. Is I think we've talked in the past that having both of those roads under construction is gonna be pretty detrimental to emergency services, true?
Definitely, yeah. When it was laid out with this time frame, Highway 8 was supposed to be wrapping up.
Right.
That they've been delayed a number of times with the environmental permitting that they've had to go over and beyond that was originally known, and then project financing. Just the price kept going up, and they are chasing funding to fully fund that project. And that's why we're here, and they kept moving back, and now I think we know where they're at, but again, that could still even go further away, right?
It's a major project. My concern with Haro is really around tying to 97. I don't know if you might have realized Monday night we had a room full of folks from Chestnut Creek 1 who were terribly concerned about getting onto 97. Now we're gonna put another 100, 110 homes out there, which will only make it.
So there is some history to that corridor, right? MnDOT was very proactive and active in the community here, and we had 1 or 2 open houses. We were talking about the improvements along that area, which had started at Castlewood Golf Course entrance and went through Harrow, and then it went through a bunch of the H's, the roads, and we talked about access being taken away at some of those and pushing them back out to Harrow Avenue with intersection control changes. Maybe it was gonna be a stoplight or a roundabout. So we were getting pretty active in that and started putting some packages together to go chase some legislation money, and that's when the fortunate accident happened at Goodview, and all resources went right to Goodview 97. And dealt with that, and then MnDOT's now obviously been fully engaged on the 97 project that's going on right now. They do have a study coming out that they're still waiting to start, 61 corridor, but this is obviously an area that's, it's something to start talking about again, with a definite need. MnDOT has had some staff changeover at the local level, but Dimitri Tomatovich is still, kind of now, or Adam Joseph's, just got promoted, so we do have some consistency there from a history standpoint with MnDOT. But, there is a lot of change that's not happening in the last couple of years. So,
And Ryan and I were able to chat with MnDOT folks about this corridor recently and just kind of put this on the radar again, that we would like to look at that intersection and revisit that corridor study, get back into that swing of things and examine this area, because certainly the traffic heading out that direction towards Manning is getting worse and worse all the time. Needs some attention.
because of that changeover that has occurred at MnDOT, we're now doing a quarterly meeting with MnDOT and Washington County combined to talk about some of these areas. And last one that we have specifically talked about Harrow lines.
So, Neil, I guess question on a different project. At one point, was Fenway from 97 South figured in to be one of these big major projects?
That's in your 27, that's planned for 2027. And that would include the trail extension. So Fenway Avenue is right here, but that's not gonna be a full recon. That already has a section. It'll be full pavement replacement, spot curb, definitely, some pedestrian ramps and stuff like that. It's got, I know within that budget, it has a couple locations for rectangular rapid flashing beacon systems, the yellow push buttons. And it does include the trail extension from MnDOT's Highway 97 project, all the way down to connect to the existing trail on the east side of town.
This $9 million is projected for next year from highway, our part of Highway 8 to traffic counts, sidewalks, at 4.5 on REIT, that's state money, correct?
That's the bonding bill model that we use.
Yeah. So, but 4.5 of that number's on us.
Correct. Yeah, we have already encumbered additional funds outside of the city of Forest Lake taxes or other sources of revenue for a rehab of 4.5.
The other 4.5 though, is that's our dollars, are we bonding for that? Or is that,
Which one?
the other, out of that 9 million for next year?
This?
Yes. Half of it is state money, the other half is that, like our share just on levy or bonding to that, or where are those dollars?
Well, this comes from your Fund 211 franchise fees, which you guys have talked about tonight. And a portion of that also is your general tax levy. That's just your annual road project. This amounts,
I don't think we're
as
seeing a cursor right at it.
oh, it's not, it's, no. So we'll talk more about this funding tonight. This is our justification that came out of state aid construction funds. That has no connection to your general tax. Your state aid city gets construction, state aid, construction, and maintenance money. You get the maintenance money, dispersed twice, and you get your construction money dispersed in January. You can't use the construction money until there's a project, and then you get the reimbursement funds. So we're State Highway 33, we use state aid construction. On Highway 97, we use state aid construction and sewer and water, there's a lot of sewer water. So wherever we get that state aid, goes through. But some of the projects that I just talked about, they're all state aid routes. We could use state aid funds on those roadways, but your state aid funds aren't that big. And your state aid money is going towards, like, County Road 33. Everything I projected to use it at County State Highway 32 Road out of that, and it's used on 97. And then Washington County also has another project coming that we're gonna have a local share, the intersection of Highway 61 and County Road 50, where we would plan to use construction state aid funds
So going back to priorities then, it's what would be, you mentioned having fatality out on 12th, and everyone drives that street, and it is sometimes taking your life in your own hands, getting out of some of those businesses there. So that one for me, ideally would be moved up, but I suspect you need more runway there, just trying to negotiate that with all the businesses there, and then the other, if 32 goes forward, the other projects in the area is why it's pushed out towards that.
Yeah, that's kind of how the timing felt, right? We've been locked in with what we thought the schedule was gonna be for County State Highway 32. Was a 26, not too late after that was established, it's been a 27 project for a long time. That's kind of where we're still thinking it would be, right? But they're still gonna have quite a bit of work to do in 28 here and there, and stuff, just like how 33 went through for some time after everything was open again. And you're gonna, you would not want County Road 32 down if we were doing 12th Street. And we'd like to have that restaurant too. We're working on it. So.
Any other thoughts on sequence?
Another thing to, think big picture too, does it all have to be done, can it be phased out, right? You guys obviously are the ones that are gonna have to deal with it politically as elected officials. Obviously, we try to do our best to maneuver a project and communicate as best to our ability, but at the end of the day, you gotta do what you gotta do, right? So, take that 12th Street from Southwest, for instance, is there a project from Broadway to 3rd, is that a project? And then let that get to a point where it's not gonna impact traffic for an economic purpose, then is it then 3rd down to the County Road? That's all ways you can look at it too, so I don't always get gobbled up and it's gotta be done, that one song.
There's still a lot of uncertainty on 32, right?
Sure.
That could get pushed even further, so.
I hear what you're saying.
Uncertainty on 32, as far as that can be pushed further because of funding that, so maybe if that happens, then maybe 12 does move up.
We're hoping to hear something in November from a funding perspective at a higher level, but it's a lot of things shut down right now. Communications are going too far.
I know we didn't do much direction, I think
It's okay.
we're in agreement of what some factors to change.
Yeah, this is to educate and remind folks where we're at with these projects. These conversations will come up again, right? We talk about, the trade-offs between doing this or doing that. We'll be adjusting. Obviously too, some of the things we're not in control, the timing of some of those other major projects will kind of look to shift these up or down based on those as well, so. Yeah, as you mentioned, the funding, we're asking for from the federal legislature, for County 32 would be a big help to get that project done, and that would free up some dollars to go to the so.
Alright, thanks, Ryan. Alright, so then let's jump down to budget review. I don't know if you want to do A or just go D and go back to A or where.
I think we probably should do A because it is a big part of B. So just. So item 8A, if people don't have an agenda in front of them, is regarding franchise fees. So one of the things, when I first took the job, obviously, you kind of get a lay of the land in terms of our budget and our finances, and look at everything from soup to nuts in terms of what we should be doing, what a responsible city should be looking at. One of the things that, is anytime you look at, say, an audit of our city, or this is the case for a lot of cities, there's a pie chart in there that says where your revenue comes from. Our pie chart is pretty much one color, and a tiny little sliver. Other ones, that big part of the pie chart is property taxes. So where does our revenue come from? Most of it is property taxes. Other small slivers are, state aid, stuff, we get $0 in local government aid, which is direct aid from the state. Other cities like Duluth or other sort of aging cities get millions of dollars in that regard, right? And so their pie chart looks a little different. The property tax levy does not support the entire budget of the city, right? The budget is supported by other revenue sources. So one of those other potential revenue sources is franchise fees. We currently have franchise fees in place, so on your on your electric bill and on your gas utility bill, you'll see a line item there, city franchise fee. And those were implemented in 2013, I believe. And certainly, no one in this room should be of an illusion other than to say that this is a tax by a different name. It's certainly nothing less than, I think, someone told me it was Palendi, right, a while back, said fee is a tax is a fee, we all acknowledge that. What this does is it diversifies where your revenue comes from, such that not the exact same subset of people will necessarily contribute to that pie chart, right? While it is most of the same group of people, there are other entities that don't get property tax that would get this franchise fee. So churches and schools and other nonprofit entities that don't necessarily pay property tax do end up paying franchise fees, and that can be again a nice way to diversify that group of people that pay into that fund. So franchise fees are earmarked for road improvements. So that's another thing that is a little bit more of a guarantee that the taxpayer, or in this case the fee payer, knows that their money is being spent on roads, right? It's not going to be used for something else, some other program, whatever. It's going to be used on roads. So franchise fees, it is a nice way of making sure that that money is used towards things that most people can support. Roads. So to make a long story short, the franchise fees have not been increased since 2013. And currently, they bring in around $820,000 annually. So that money is, you asked the question about where's the other $4.5 million coming. Ryan gave you some explanation on some of that. Some of it just comes from the general levy, and some of it comes from that $820,000 in franchise fees. As you saw, though, that wasn't a 1 year $9 million. It was $9 million, $9 million. You know, there was a lot of millions there to be paid for, right? And that's just street projects, right? So the proposal, and so our budget, the 12.6% identified as preliminary budget, that was based on a very, very modest increase to $900,000. That was just because I didn't have the information from the utilities on what we could anticipate for additional revenue. So if you chose not to raise franchise fees at all, you could cut a small amount out of the budget of around $80,000 to make up for that difference. So that's just something I put forward as something I thought we could do as kind of small things. Staff suggestion, however, is to sort of catch up with franchise fees in terms of inflation. So we looked at construction cost index or consumer price index of what it was when we put it in 2013, what the inflation rate has been to now, and have a suggested rate increase here that would end up generating about $1.14 million annually. That additional revenue could be used in two ways, or a combination of the two. One, it could buy down the levy, so to speak. So instead of 12.6 million, 12.6%, you can buy that down to, what do we got here? 10.9? Yeah. So, you know, it's a very significant impact, right? Alternatively, you could look to cut the budget in other places and simply do more roads, right? And I think most people agree our roads are a bit behind in state of repair. You could take that CIP and shift it forward. You know, I think we're looking at upwards of $4 million over the next 10 years. There would be additionally, you could pick up $4 million worth of roads in the next 10 years that would get done if you did in that manner, if you took that money and just increased your spending on roads. So, and of course, you could do it either combination of either, right? You could do half and half, do 10%, 90%. choose to increase their franchise fees, what we'll get to here next, item 8B is whether or not you want to use that to lower the levy, or if you want to use that to increase the spending on roads. So, that was kind of the abbreviated version, but, I think it's kind of simple terms. Anyone have any questions on franchise fees?
Do you want to talk about the impact per customer?
Sure.
Because when we say numbers like, it'll be $4 million
Yeah.
additional dollars in the next 10 years, that seems like a large number. But when you break it down to what is the net impact per person per year, we are looking at dollars, you get charged quarterly, correct? Monthly, so then it would increase $1 a month, so $12 a year. And then if we just can continue to compound that per person, that's when we see those numbers really increase. And so what was brought in front of us and what people have talked about was that they would like to see us to be good stewards. And part of that is finding additional ways to, I mean, a tax is a tax, as Mark said, but find additional ways to then lessen that burden. And this is one way we can do it, take a nice chunk out of that levy, but then subsidize it elsewhere without having that huge net impact.
So just to be clear, the dollar a month increases on the natural gas bill, the $1.50 will be proposed on the electric bill. So most families that have both electric and gas would be looking at $2.50 a month addition to that franchise fee increase.
We talked about our comparable cities. Do we know where our comparable cities are doing as far as franchise fees?
Anecdotally, yes, this would be very much in line with what other cities are doing. I don't have that data in front of me, but if we did chat about that with the electric and gas utilities, both Excel and Conexus, and they felt very comfortable that this was in line.
So currently, as this did increase, we probably lower than most.
Yeah, I would say.
Thoughts?
I mean, it's, in one sense, it's a horse and piece, right? We're gonna, once they get fixed, either, no more than 2 years ago, we've decided to make a significant addition to the general budget by actually budgeting for road improvement, which hadn't previously been done. So as you think about what have our taxes done over the last few years, is because we finally decided to start paying for our roads and improving them. We can either continue on that track by floating a couple extra bucks a month collectively, as well as having some of those entities that aren't paying property taxes, to fund roads, enable them to participate by making this adjustment. So I guess I'd probably support the latter, let everybody have a little piece of the action, if you will.
If I can just piggyback off of that, like this is the one thing that the core thing that cities should be doing. You might have a question about what we should be putting in the parks or not, or different things. But the one thing at its core, cities should be doing infrastructure, roads. And what this, if I'm a taxpayer, I'm thinking, okay, now I know for sure those dollars are going to go towards roads. So that makes me feel more comfortable about doing this, even though a fee is a tax. You guarantee that these dollars will go right into roads. You see that on a daily basis as we have been behind budgeting for our roads, and so this helps us get caught up a little faster, and ensures that where those dollars go. That we don't, this isn't kind of at this point, unfortunately, but more than welcome to stick around after and answer any questions or reach out via email or phone numbers to talk to anyone.
So with that, Mr. Mayor, again, not a decision point tonight, but something we're going to ask you to consider as you go forward and create the budget here. So with that, we could move into that topic of discussion if you're ready to get it. So what we handed out to everyone in the audience and to you folks is something similar to what you've seen before from us. Just sort of call it a smorgasbord of things to choose from if you're inclined to reduce the budget or reduce the levy impact, I should say. And I say that because there's a couple of items on there that aren't really, they're still part of the budget, they're not part of the expenses. So a couple of things we found, and what you see is the top is a wider variety of things that are potential for impacts to the levy. And notably, there are things which we're adding to the levy this coming year, right, in terms of staff and that kind of thing. And then, on the bottom is staff's recommendation, as we heard from the council, the goal is to get the levy under 10%, if possible. And so I'll just walk you through those 4 items that are on that list. One is the police increase in state aid funding. This is not something we invented, so don't give any credit to Ellie or myself, but we just got good news from the state that previous year's budget and then this year's coming budget, we had looked at a fairly modest, actually a decrease in state funding. That was based on some information we had heard a couple of years ago that this was gonna be decreasing and the funds were running out for this. For whatever reason, the legislature the last couple of years has been able to fund this. I think it's a pretty unpopular thing to cut funding for police, at least at this point in our conversation. And so we are confident now that we, with this latest news, we know that next year's state aid funding will be an adequate amount, and we can now more accurately budget for that revenue. So we were under budgeting for the revenue, if that makes sense. So now we're saying we can add $100,000 to that revenue number and count on that as much as we can count on it. So that has an impact, obviously, more revenue, again, a small sliver of that pie chart that isn't tax supported, or I should say property tax supported. Then the increase in franchise fees, as you can see there, that's a pretty big impact, we should choose to do that. And then one of our suggestions that is a cut to staff would be the cut to the additional sergeant position. That's, been in conversations with our police department about this. Certainly they would like to have all 4 positions that are proposed. They've been long proposed, right? They're not just this year, but they've asked for this. But I think that given the just the makeup of our department at this point in time, we do feel like, and not just me talking here, but our chiefs weren't able to do this tonight, but feel that this is something that they can handle, which is adding these 2 officers without immediately adding a sergeant. There'll just be some adjustment time to the staff as a whole. We're still in a position where we're filling gaps, and I think we can make this move. And not that this position would go away in terms of, it would probably be an ask for 27, but we think we can do without it in 26. Then the final item is just a reduction in overtime. I think that was at Councilmember Erickson's behest. We looked at that a little bit closer. Still feel that even with this modest reduction, quite frankly, that reduction could be a bit more, but we wanted to stay conservative, just not knowing again our situation with hiring and all that kind of stuff. I think the next line item, if there was a gray area down here, or an invisible ink here that we would add on, would be just those delays in staffing onboarding. And the reason they're not on here right now in black ink is that it is a kick the can down the road type of issue, and if we can take a harder look at the budget without doing a lot of that, I think that'd be valuable. Just because if you approve the position and then reduce the levy because you know that position, or collectively you won't have all those positions filled by January 1, you'll have a couple of months of no salary from those positions. It means in 2027's budget, we're gonna have those in there, and so you've automatically handicapped yourself for 2027 to say those have gotta be in the budget, or we have to actually literally cut people from the staff, not just cut people we're going to hire, but cut the existing staff members if you wanted to eliminate that. So avoiding that kick the can down the road type of thing is, I think, is a good budget principle, if you will. So not to say it can't be done, we can absolutely reduce the levy this year and account for that very real situation, which is that we will not have all those positions filled on January 1. It could be 2, 3, 4 months before we really fill all those out. So it's a significant amount of money. We just don't have it on this budget at this point in time, but that's certainly something we're willing to entertain. It's just, I thought we should look at some other things a little harder first.
Well, I think, we obviously had a number of unfilled positions last fiscal year, so we were able to use that savings to really buy down, because by policy, we push that money where?
Into one of the capital funds, so, I believe it's into the equipment fund that we put that money.
So we're just able to reduce what we just save each year.
Yep.
So you're still saying it's going with the deputy chief?
Yeah, so these are, I think all of these on top are, in the budget as it stands today, right? The staff recommendations are the 4 things we would look to cut out.
Can you speak a little bit to the necessity of like that role and the 2 patrol officers? I mean, I know.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of people here that maybe are like kind of engaging for the first time. You know, the one thing that's not on here is a $50 million public works building.
Correct.
That's fun on Facebook, but that's not what this is about.
Right.
So what's the reason for a deputy chief?
So currently the fire department is made up of a full-time chief, and then the rest of the entirety of the staff after that is part-time, paid on call, firefighters. So regular folks that sign up to run in the burning buildings for an hourly wage. And they get an hourly wage and a retirement benefit, out of that, that contract that they have with us. So, beyond that, we do not have any other full-time employees, that are dedicated to working for the fire department. That, I don't say what's usual and not usual. I think if there's 800 cities in Minnesota, there's 800 different fire departments. Everyone's a little different. But I think for a city our size, it is unusual to have only one full-time employee on the fire department. I think if you look at, the cost of our fire department for a city this size is pretty gosh darn low. I know $1 million something or other, I don't have it off the top of my head, a lot of money. But for a town of 20,000 people with the sort of infrastructure, the big boxes we have, the apartment buildings we have, manufacturing facilities, all those things that are protected by our department, it's a pretty affordable fire department as it is. Yes, this adds a fair amount of cost to that. It is also supported, people should know that about 20% of our budget is paid by Columbus, we also serve. They also have volunteers from Columbus that are paid on call, as you call them. So it's a nice partnership with them, and they would be on board. This is the full cost here. They would be on board for 20% of the cost of that position as well. Just another note here, the cost that's listed here is the fully loaded cost. So that's not someone's salary, that is someone's salary, benefits, everything that goes into, merit contribution to FICA, all that kind of stuff is lumped in here. So this is the fully loaded cost of the employee.
And if I could just add to that, our fire chief, Al Newman, only paid employee, 70, 80 hours a week, every week. You see his vehicle here all the time. Only one full-time. Stillwater, we're actually, you wouldn't think, but we are a population, we've got the same size as Stillwater, I think we're even actually a little bit larger. They have on-call, and they also have paid firefighters, and their budget's $1 million more than what we're doing in Forest Lake. So they've seen the same amount of people. So I think that needs to be pointed out. This, there was a position that the chief declined last year, wanting this position, knowing this was more important. So we probably have, to your point, the most fiscal conservative fire department for sure in the metro area, if not the state.
To add to that, on the fire board, he gave us 2 pages of things that he is responsible for, and being the only full-time person, you can't get to all that stuff. And there's things that are required by the state, like to go out and put the key boxes in businesses, so when their alarm goes off, they can get into the building. They don't have the time to go out and do this, to monitor and replace these key boxes and make sure that they have the proper facilities so they can get into them. So, and I think he's trying to groom somebody else for his position as a fire chief. He's getting up there, he probably wants to retire sometime soon too, and like to probably have the time to be able to train somebody that can step into that position when his time comes to retire.
Yeah, it's sort of a succession planning tool as well. Trying to take someone from a part-time staff into a full-time role is a difficult transition as well. So, and then just if I could about the police positions, we've looked at, and in previous meetings, folks, if they want to look up old agenda packets, you can certainly see a little bit more detailed information than we have for you tonight, but, you know, the call volume in the last 5 years has just ballooned. And the types of calls, I know that, in a recent exit interview with one of our police officers, just talked about how the types of calls being more mental health calls than ever before, right? So 10, 15 years ago, calls were a little simpler in nature. Bad guy doing something bad, you go get bad guy. Now it's a person with a mental health challenge doing something. And the approach is just so much different. There was more compliance. A lot of calls were handled by one officer. Pull someone over, you ask them to get out of the car, they get out of the car, and handle the situation. Now you ask someone to get out of the car, they might drive away, they might just decide to sit there. There's just so many more calls are needed to be handled by 2 officers than ever before. So you have call volume going up, call complexity going up, and the number of police officers hasn't gone up in, I don't know, a long time. Obviously, we can all look at a graph of population and police force and see that that doesn't work either. Call volume, population. So not just call volume, calls per capita, right? So population is going up, but also calls per person is going up. So there's just a lot more challenges than there ever have been. Nobody has to alert the media. There are challenges with the world of policing. You pick up a newspaper, you'll understand that it's not the world's easiest environment to hire people right now and to run a force that in the right kind of way. So we do feel like this. There's a lot of need. The other thing I think to stress here is that of the 4 positions, 3 of those positions would be boots on the ground. The one that we're suggesting that we could cut would be the sergeant. If I can call a sergeant boots on the ground, I think most sergeants would tell you they're out of patrol a fair amount. Yes, they do administrative work, but they are on the ground, out of patrol quite a bit. And obviously the patrol officers are out there on the beat. And this is not, we're not adding to the top side of our department, we're adding to the line up, frontline workers, right? So I feel like this is a good investment in our community. We did a survey, and hopefully some of you had an opportunity to participate in that. I don't know if it's still up on the website, is it?
It's still active
Yeah,
in
so
the background,
you
yeah.
can always take your input on the city's website. There is a budget survey. We got over 100 responses. It was quite a bit more than we've ever gotten before. Almost everybody, a good chunk of people, vast majority of them, asked, where would you like to see the budget spent? Public safety was top of the list. And I think we saw in our recent history here the support the community has for public safety. So that is why those positions are in the budget ask.
So we are, with that 9.25, I think there's still some room there to continue to come down. Maybe we get more updated numbers on where we're coming in this year for budget.
Yeah.
That'll play into it. And we are, you go to the city's website, you hit one email, it emails all of us. Like, our phone numbers are on the website, I think. Some of us have businesses in town, stop by, we're more than willing to listen and hear. We're struggling with this as much as anyone else. When we look at these numbers, when you look at all the construction and road stuff that we have to do, the police, public safety, it's a hard decision. And so the more feedback we get, the better. We appreciate everyone here coming tonight, sharing their thoughts. We have until, is it December 3rd? When is the?
December 8th is the Truth and Taxation meeting, and that is the date that we tentatively have for the council scheduled to approve the final levy.
Can you explain the truth and taxation?
Truth and Taxation meeting is, you folks, when we all receive our property tax statements, there's going to be a notification on there about a date and time for you to come and approach the city council to discuss your thoughts and feelings about what your tax statement is saying. So that Truth and Taxation hearing is that opportunity. It will be held during our regular council meeting on December 8th, right at the beginning of the meeting, and we invite and encourage you to attend.
Mark, there's 2 more options there on the top chart versus rollback. Looking at capital projects projects and capital equipment, that's a significant potential savings. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, so the term rollback is sort of a term I invented, or stole from Walmart, or I don't know where I got it. You see, what we looked at tonight, the capital improvement plan, that was just for the roads. Of course, we have a similar one for all of our equipment, plow trucks, pickups, and bobcats, and all the things that the cities need to maintain their infrastructure. And then we have one for parks, so we have 3 main capital improvement plans. And rather than trying to very complicated format of saying, well, let's move this project here and move that project over here, and rearrange this and rearrange that. And I think sometimes people have a simplified idea that, well, if we just eliminate that project, that's a $5 million project, shave $5 million off the budget. Nope, that's not how it works, because this is a capital improvement plan. These capital funds live outside the general fund levy. So you have these 3 funds that are outside of the general fund. They are within the general fund, I should say, they're outside the general ledger. So when we spend out of those, we don't see that immediate impact of a $5 million expenditure. What we do see is we see the amount that we put into it each year. So that is our expense. The general ledger is, we put $500,000 into this fund every year, or that fund, we see that as an expense. Put a regular, as opposed to having spikes and valleys in your budget, put a regular amount in each year that allows those capital funds to remain solid. So we have to make sure that those capital funds don't get below zero, and that they kind of ride the wave of projects, right? So what the rollback idea would be is just a very generalized idea that instead of, you saw up there 10 years worth of street projects, you would take that list and say, let's make that a 9-year CIP to be done in 10 years. So we would take 9 years of that CIP, or 90% of that cost, and put it in terms of a 10-year plan. So we just, you can imagine just stretching it out by 1 year, right? So this is a 1-year rollback of those plans. And what that would mean is that we would be able to put this much less into those capital funds each year to keep them solid.
Each year, this year.
Well, this year in particular, but each year going forward too, right? So this is not a kick the can down the road thing. This is a conscious choice to do fewer projects in the same time. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So your roads will be 10% worse, if you will, right? Your capital, your trucks and your plow trucks will be 10% older as well.
So right now, we have budgeted savings, which I've read online that people want us to do for project, where we have the option to scale back our level of savings and just stretch out over a long period of time the things that we feel like we should be done, or have safe equipment.
I think you saw Ryan's presentation tonight. You could pick one of those projects outside that 10-year window. And let's say it was the $10 million one, it was the 12,000 Harrow project. You could tell everybody in the community that we're not going to do Harrow Avenue until 2036. And you would save, over the course of 10 years, save that $10 million. It's a lot of money. This is not that, right? It's not, you don't see $1 million savings here, right? But it's something like that. You would look at a few of those smaller projects, pick them out of that 10-year cycle and say, gotta wait. I mean, you can do that in any scale you want to. This is a 10% reduction. Yeah.
This is 2.2%.
Of the total.
If we added it to the bottom, we're down to a 7% left. Pretty deep single digits.
Yep.
I would love to hear via email, people think about just spreading out the things that we feel like need to be done. About 10 to 12 years ago, there was a decision made from people who were sitting here then to cut the budget significantly. Not just keep it 0 level, to cut the budget significantly. And we're reaping the rewards of that right now with the roads we have, the parks we have. We can talk about it, but they made a difference. And again, like Mayor said, we all pay property taxes like everybody else. So we're trying to thread the needle, find the right spots. I welcome more feedback. And I appreciate all of you guys showing up and coming and number one, sharing your thoughts, and number two, sticking around and listening. Because we've had room room's full, they say their piece and they'll leave. So I appreciate you guys being here, we're truly I do.
To one point on that, the example would be North Shore. That should have been done 5-6 years ago. It was $4 million, 5-6 years ago, that could have been $2.5 million. And so, the more we do push this out, the more expensive this project is going to get. So that's what we contemplate as well, we're trying to make these decisions. Right now, it's going to cost us less down the road. But all feedback's great.
I think one thing to add too, when it comes to what you were saying, when it was years ago when they were cutting the budget, for example, there in community development, there were 3 positions, and then they laid off 2 people and pushed those 3 positions into 1 position. And so they were requiring 1 person to do essentially 3 jobs, which then services were decreased, that person's morale completely tanked. And then the community just wasn't getting the services and more complaints were coming in. And so we are still, from that time period, which was over 10 years ago, coming back from that. And then too, with the compensation study that we reviewed today, you can see that it's just difficult to get staff in here and staying here. And then too, Forest Lake was known as a place that people didn't want to work. And we're trying to come back from that, and we're trying to be a place that we want people to come work, that they're happy to work here. And so we're getting great employees where the morale is high. And so we get staff that's staying here and that they're connecting with the community as well. So you guys are getting a great experience when you are coming here. So just trying to thread that needle, it's difficult.
Okay, enough on budget. Again, more feedback the better. Please reach out. I appreciate you being here. We have one more item on the workshop agenda before going into the special council meeting. So it is utility connection fee.
Yeah, and Mr. Mayor and Council, I'm gonna go briefly on this. This is really just an educational piece, as you folks have asked, you know, if we could do a little bit of education along the way on different things. So we recently reviewed our rates for sewer and water and the increases that we are looking at there, and whether or not we're on track with those funds to stay solvent. One of the components that goes into those is obviously user fees. How much do you pay for a gallon of water? How much do you pay for a gallon of sewer? What's not always discussed as often is the charges that developers pay. So if folks don't know, developers come in and build development. If there's 100 homes in that development, the developer will pay, or the builder, depending on how it's structured, will pay connection charges for those the larger facilities that operate our sewer and water systems. And the memo in your packet just outlines that that system. I like to think of it as buying your piece of the water tower, your piece of the well, right? So if there are 8,000 some homes in town, not that we hook to sewer water, that's a bad example, but let's just say there's 1,000 people hooked to the water system. Each new home is buying 1/1,000th of that water tower. Each new home is buying 1/1,000th of the well. Even a well is for water treatment plants, right? So you're buying your little piece of those bigger facilities. Same with sewer, you're buying your share of that lift station, you're buying your share of that force main, and so on and so forth. The sewer charge, as you saw in the memo, is split into 2. There is a Met Council charge, and that goes to pay for the facility down in St. Paul and every pipe that gets all the way there. You know, we're a long ways from St. Paul. So luckily we're not charged by the mile. So we get the same charge as people that live in, you know, South St. Paul. So that charge those developers or the builders pay into that that fee structure. So we do collect those fees and we do use them for improvements, upgrades to the system. What we cannot use those funds for is maintenance of the system. That has to come from user charges. So these fees are collected and used for expansion of the system. Sometimes that might mean paying back expansions that already happened. So we do use it to pay down debt sometimes, and that is a perfectly legitimate use, because oftentimes you need to expand the system before you have the development, right? You can't wait till the pipe overflows and then fix the pipe. You gotta do it in and sewer and stormwater, you see these projects coming up. The timing of those projects in terms of what years they're gonna take place is not really as important as how many homes are gonna be built ahead of those. So those are just guesses based on how many homes we think will be built by that year, right? So those projects are put on a year, but they're probably more accurately put on a number of homes. So when we get to this level of homes, we gotta add another water treatment plant. We get to this level of homes, we might need to add another water tower or whatever it might be, right? And sometimes it means it has to do with where those houses occur, right? We have, Brian mentioned to do this force main rearrangement if this develops and that develops. So it's an intricate puzzle. These fees pay for that. All the memo told you today is that we benchmarked you against other towns in the area. You can see that we're competitive, if you will. We're certainly not behind in any regard, at least not in the sewer and water venue. What we need to do, however, is dive deeper here, and we just haven't had time yet, into the calculation that goes into this. So benchmarking this number is nice to know, but it is not how we set these fees, and it cannot be how we set these fees. You can't just charge what your neighbors charge for this. You need to charge what your actual needs are, divided by the number of people that are gonna pay into that need. So it's a very simple formula, and you saw it in the memo here, which is that the rates are the total dollar amount in our CIP for expansion of the system, divided by the number of homes that we intend to build, or the equivalent of homes. If you're gonna build a manufacturing facility, it's an equivalent number. You just divide that out, and that's the rate. Now, it never works out to the exact dollar, it's a moving target, because you're always building homes, you're always knocking out things on that infrastructure list, but that's, generally speaking, that is how it would be defensible in court if the developer challenged those fees and said, I'm not paying $10,000 a lot for whack, that's ridiculous. You can say, well, neighbors are charging this, well, that doesn't hold up. What holds up is a plan that shows this is what we're gonna build, this is how many houses we're gonna pay for it, there's your calculation. So that's the work we'll be doing here in the next several months to kind of dial that in and double check that this number is still adequate to fund those improvements. What we don't want this to happen, what we don't want to happen is that development is the cost of development, expanding our system. We don't want that to be borne by existing taxpayers or existing ratepayers, I should say. And we don't want people on the sewer water system today to have to pay for someone else's future part of the water tower, right? So it's important that we keep these fees as high as we can, without pricing ourselves out of the market too, right? So that's, the ceiling on this is that you don't wanna have a price so high that is A, is indefensible, and B, developers say, I can't build it in Forest Lake, I don't wanna invest in this community, I gotta go somewhere else where the fees are lower, right? So you're hearing a lot of talk about this at the legislature. Builders associations are lobbying their legislators to say, you gotta stop these cities with these crazy fees. I want everyone to remember, and I hope folks in this room remember this too, when that's being brought up in the legislature. The reason these fees are what they are is to protect existing taxpayers from having to bear the burden of development. Development should pay for itself, that's the general principle. When a development comes in, there should be no net cost to the city on day one. Going forward, they're a new taxpayer and they pay for the increased service they're getting, but not for the increased infrastructure that they got. They already have paid for that, right? So they pay their own way for those things. Stormwater is another utility that we have, similar, very much in nature, just a little bit tougher sometimes to wrap your head around what those facilities are. But it's all the pipes and ponds, those things that you see around town, and those have a cost too, and an operational nature to it. The amount of regulation that goes into that is substantial. And Dave's employees do an awful lot to comply with that regulation. I think I was sharing with the mayor that I was at the pleasure of being audited at my last employer on all 6 of the major regulation categories within stormwater, and the checklist alone was 16 pages long. So that was just a checklist item. So those are, kind of how we get to sewer and water charges. I'd take any questions about the logistics of all that, I hope everyone kind of understood. And then we'll kind of lay that out, why we do what we do, and, we'll come back to you with some harder numbers on, are our fees still appropriate for what we have left to build?
Appreciate your time. Okay, I think that's everything on here, so, we will adjourn tonight's workshop. We do have to open up then a city council meeting,
We're gonna go down to the Forest Lake Room
Okay.
for the special meeting, and then that will be followed by a closed session in the same room.
There's no motion right now.
Nope, we can just adjourn it.
Workshop, so.
Yep.
Thanks everyone
Thank you for coming tonight, I appreciate your time.